Salve te discipuli, this is help for your Latin studies in Henle First Year Latin, exercise number 158. In this exercise, we are introduced to lesson 12, where we learn about the third conjugation verbs. And third conjugation verbs differ from the first and second conjugation in that there's no typical pattern to the four principal parts. So you'll notice in the vocabulary in the purple book that it lists out all four principal parts for every vocabulary word for these third conjugation verbs. And that's because they may vary in their ending as you progress through the four different principal parts. One thing to keep in mind with the third conjugation verbs is the way that you can tell that they are a third conjugation verb is if that infinitive form, that's the second one in each vocabulary word. So we have duco, ducere, duxi, ductus. And then we have gero, gerere, gessi, gestis. So these aren't really following a pattern, but the second form, which is the infinitive form, ends in the three letters E-R-E. That differs from the second conjugation verbs in that there's no macron over the first E. In Latin, they would call that a short E. So in the second conjugation verbs, the infinitive ending is E-R-E, but that first E has a macron. And the third conjugation infinitive endings are E-R-E with no macron. So that's how you can tell them apart. And if you want a little practice with that, you could go ahead and look at exercise 156. Check it against the answer key as you go through. You're looking at those last three letters to determine which conjugation each of the verbs listed belongs to. But for this video, we're doing exercise 158. So I would encourage you to go ahead and read the content on page 140. Also in your grammar book, you may find it helpful to have your book open to rule number 166. That shows the model verb of the third conjugation here, which you'll see given in the vocabulary of your purple book. At the top of page 141, mitto, mittere, missi, missus. This is the model verb, is mitto, and it gives you how to conjugate that in the present tense, rule number 166. So with all of that in mind, let's take a look at what we're doing in exercise 158. It tells us first to pick out the third person plural by the final personal signs. Remember that third person plural ending, no matter what conjugation verb, we're still working with O or M for first person singular, S, T, and then mus, tis, unt. Unt, NT being the third person plural personal sign. So as we look through the list here of these 18 words, we want to look at the last two letters and see if it's NT, and that would be the way that we would recognize a third person plural verb. So you see that in number 1, you see that in number 4, number 5, and so on. So that's the first step. The second step is to go through and translate each word, giving 3 meanings for each form. You may remember that in the present tense, there's 3 different ways to translate the action. So looking at the first one, number 1, it says defendunt. Defendunt, okay? So looking at my new vocabulary at the top here, defendo, defendere, defendi, defensus, that means defend. Now I want to determine by the personal sign, who am I talking about and how many? Well, NT is third person plural, so it's they. It's they defend would be one way to say that in the present tense. There's 2 other ways that we could translate this in the present tense. We could say they are defending. And finally, we could say they do, defend. So 3 different ways to translate a present tense verb there. Let's do one more. Number 2, mittis. Okay, so I'm going to look up here at my new vocabulary. Keep in mind there are 2 other words given on the previous page in case you come across those in exercise 158. But this is up here. Mitto, mittere, missy, missus means send. And so I'm looking at the personal ending, which is S. And that is a second person singular. So I'm talking about you, one person. So you send would be how we translate that in one way. We could also say in the present tense, you are sending, or we could say you do send. All 3 of those are correct translations of a present tense verb with the ending S, second person singular. So continue to progress through those word by word. Check the personal ending. All of them are in the present tense for this exercise. So you want to give those 3 different translations, 3 different forms of translation in the present tense for each verb that you translate. Another thing just to notice pattern-wise as we look at rule number 166, the endings here. With first and second conjugation, with my students, I've called this a connecting vowel, the E with a macron, and second conjugation, the A with a macron in the first conjugation. It appears here that the connecting vowel is I, and just a short I. Until you get to third person plural, it changes to you. So it's just a peculiar thing to notice about the third conjugation verbs. We have mitto, and then mit is, mit it, mit imus, mit itis, and then mit und. So with any of those third conjugation verbs, as you go to conjugate them in the present tense, just be aware of that pattern, that you would start with the O for first person singular, and then you'd have that I connecting vowel for second, third person singular, first, second person plural, and then the third person plural changes to you. I hope this has been helpful. Have a great day.